So I think this brings us to a good transition to our final segment, the story behind the story. In this segment, we like to talk about our guests, their creative endeavors, what they're currently working on creatively, maybe their author origin story, so to speak, because everybody has a different, unique way that they got into writing and telling stories. I was dictating stories to family members when I was like 3 or 4, before I could even write, and I was drawing pictures to go along with them. So everybody has like their own unique story. So Katie, where did you find writing? How did you find this creative endeavor? Or how did it find you, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was just always in me. I remember writing stories in my journal when I was 5. I won awards in 6th grade because I never had my nose out of a book. I had more AR points than anyone in the school. I got the special award for it, because I was reading all the time. I was reading really advanced stuff. I read Gone with the Wind in 6th grade. Just loved stories. I loved sinking into them, and it just seemed natural that I would write them down. And so that was like a secret of mine. I would just write all these stories all the time, and I didn't tell anyone or let anyone read them. And then I got my nursing degree, got my bachelor's in nursing. I was a cardiac nurse and a pediatric nurse, and still just writing on the side for fun. And then I married the military, and they wrecked my career, and I couldn't work as a nurse while we were bouncing around with the Army. So I ended up well, I love to write. I was doing this free online writing class, and I just decided to follow some writing prompts, and I did that, and Miss Mabel's School for Girls was born, which was Alcara, which is my whole direct sales Leviathan now, and I decided to self-publish it because it just seemed too inefficient and messy to go with traditional. I was like, I have to wait for someone else to tell me yes, that's gross. Which it's not, but at the time I just had this mindset of I need to do this now, and so I decided to self-publish. I had a baby entrepreneur inside me I didn't know was there. I loved it. It was really fun. I sold 300 copies on launch weekend in 2014. And I was like, this is really fun. People are reading my book. And so I wrote another one and then just wrote some more. And eventually I was working as a home health pediatric nurse at the time. So at night I would go watch very stable kids sleep to make sure they didn't have any problems with their trach or whatever. And I would just write and write. And then when my husband started deploying more and we're talking about having kids, I was like, I can't be a nurse if my husband's off to who knows where. And so when we moved to Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, I was like, I think I'm going to just write full time until we have kids. And so I haven't gone back. I eventually let my nursing license expire. It took me a long time. To let go of it because I had a lot of mindset issues to work through, and eventually I let go of it, and now I'll never go back. I'll just always be running my company in my Montana mountain.
Right. So fill us in for those who don't know, what your the Miss Mabel's School for Girls. Yeah. What's the whole premise? Introduce us to your world, your characters.
Yes. All right. So I write young adult fantasy in the medieval world of Alcara. Think Harry Potter, but medieval for girls. Boys love it too. But it starts out with this witch named Bianca Monroe. She's 16. She's inherited a curse that will kill her on her 17th birthday unless she convinces the head witch of the school, Mabel, to remove it. But Mabel refuses and forces Bianca to fight for her life. It's the beginning of a soon-to-be 11-book series that spurred the world of Alcara, where I have over 50 titles across 6 or 7 different series that all interlope across a big timeline. So you can start at the beginning and read all the way through and just fall in love with the characters. Some of the characters have 13 novels. Some of them have 11. Some have less. There's a bunch of novellas and short stories that are really special to it. Yeah, it is the Leviathan that I've made. I have interest in Hollywood that's ongoing and a bunch of other really cool stuff that's happening.
Yeah, fun. So you mentioned Harry Potter, right? What were some of the seeds of inspiration? Because I'm guessing maybe that's a part of it.
Kind of. It was mostly, I loved the magical school setting. And so I just took a magical school, 3 friends that are girls, and put them into this enchanted scary forest, basically. Yeah. And that's kind of where the comparisons stop. I mean, there's magic, but they don't have wands.
Sure.
There's some comparisons. I think it's more closely tied to the Gemma Doyle trilogy than Harry Potter. But anyway, if people have liked Harry Potter, though, they love Bianca because, it's magic that has spells. I don't ever say the spells. I never write them down, but there are spells and just that sort of delightful potions and sorcery and flying rugs and that kind of stuff.
It might not be quite story behind the story, but if you could say what the Katie Cross method is, what's the Katie Cross method? And a couple of sentences. Because there's like the Satori method, and then there's a couple others I forget, but the Satori method is pretty. But what's the
For the
K-Cross method?
writing? Like for the writing or the marketing or
yeah.
the writing? Okay. I write a second draft. I write a first. No, I'm just kidding. So I plot out the story to 5,000 and 9,000 word plot according to like a 3-act structure. Sort of save the cat-esque. It's got like a first act, second act, midpoint, third act, all that kind of stuff. So I have that, and I have very general ideas for scenes. So I have the big plot, and then I'll have like scene, 2 sentences, whatever. Like just generally, this is what's going to happen. I know the goal, the conflict, the motivation for the main characters. Just like generally, kind of know what's going on, what I want to be achieved, what needs to be learned, and then I get my Scrivener file ready, and every single scene gets a new doc in the Scrivener file. I have them like color coded and stuff if they're first draft or second draft. And then I copy the scene that like for like chapter 1 and the scene prompt, and then I copy it over and I write it. And I usually, when I'm first drafting, if I'm doing my 1 launch a month schedule, then I first draft 10 to 12,000 words a day. My highest I think is 17,000. Sometimes I don't do that much. It just depends.
Is that dictation or are you ruining your fingers?
Damn, girl. It takes me about 3 to 4 hours. So I will just write. And then I usually have about 60,000 words. So it takes.
I just want to say that's hardcore. You doing all that with your fingers.
Yeah.
That's hardcore.
It feels that way, but here's the mindset hack that helped me get over this, right? Because I hear this all the time. Like, oh, I would hate writing if I did that, is what I hear all the time. This is how I got through that. Elena Johnson and I had a really good phone call, and she helped me too. But one thing I remember thinking is when I was a nurse, I certainly got tired on my shift, but I never got to a point in my shift where I'm like, I think I'm tired of doing this. I'm just going to go home, right? Like, I couldn't be a nurse for 12 hours. That's crazy. But it's like, I was a nurse for 12 hours. I was like starting IVs. Like, I was doing the thing for sometimes 18 hours. So I remember thinking like, how can I not be in my house and like write 10,000 words if I like it, right? So I remember thinking like, I am copying out and like stunting myself so much. So I just started working up to it. And the truth is after a while, you just love it. Like, I just love writing. So the 10,000 word days, I'm not exhausted. I'm not tired. I don't hate writing. I just am like done writing for the day and I go do something else. Or normally like I get the writing done and then I go to email. I do writing first and then email on those days. So I'll first draft in like a week or so. And I have this established. So even my team knows the first week of the month, I'm actually audio recording. The second week of the month, I'm first drafting. The third week of the month, I'm second drafting. And the fourth week of the month, I'm third drafting. And then I send it to my editors. They get me the previous months. I go through it in like a day or two. I narrate it. And then the second week of the next month, I'm in the first draft. Right? So that was the Katie Cross method. Is I just knew I'm doing this week. And that would look different every week because I'm a mom, right? So sometimes getting 5,000 words in the morning, 5,000 words in the afternoon, and doing email in the evening. Like whatever, like I had to be really flexible with it. But I just knew like it's Friday of the second week. I still have 30,000 words left. I'm going to ask my husband to like take the kids all morning on Saturday. I'm going to go to Starbucks and I'm going to kick out 15,000 words. Then I can do 15,000 words on Monday and I won't be too far behind. So I could just generally say like, oh, I need this. Or this first draft is going to be a little bit shorter because of how the story is. The second draft is going to take me longer. So I'm going to take a day less on the first draft, give that to the second draft and go right into it. So it was just like, it was never like I'm on, like I have to go. It was more a basic approximation. So I knew I was moving along the road. If I was at the end of the second week and I hadn't started my first draft, we were in trouble, right? Like, ah. So then I would just tell my team, hey, we're going to have to pivot. What flexibility do you have if I get you this draft on this day? Or I would say to my husband, hey, like the kids were sick this week. Can you just take this whole day and I can get my job done while yours is off? So we would just then make a new plan. And it was just basically knew my targets and where I needed to be and got it done.
How do you rest and recharge? Like, because you have to. You sound like an executor, and I know executors get penny energy from working, but we still have to recharge. How do you do that? When do you do it?
But like, think about it. I mean, that's 4 hours. Like I have 24 hours in my day. So I'm just writing 4 of them. And so after, like, I go on hikes in the middle. It's not like I sit down for 4 hours and write. I'll write for an hour, get up, make a cup of tea, come back, go for an hour hike. That's really recharging to me. Come back, write another hour, maybe I have a call like this, write another hour. That feels like a really easy day, right? Because, and then at like 3 o'clock, my kids get home at 4, from 3 to 4. It's like, you know what, I'm just going to read for a little bit, or I think I just need to vacuum. So like whatever I need to do, it's not like so many people think it's just this like hard, stressful charge, but this is the work I do every day. So it's not any different than like if I'm starting IVs in the hospital, right? It's just the work that I do. Like I just normalized process. Like I'm just at my computer doing it. So today at 9:30, I finished a call with Reddit and I sat down until I was like, you know what? I've got the BookFunnel podcast. Got to get this draft in. I'm like 2 days late. I'm just going to sit here until noon and then I'm just going to get it done. And I'm going to go on a hike to be ready for BookFunnel. And that's exactly what I did. And it worked out. So
would you say you write for about 45 minutes out of a 6 hour? Because I'm about to calculate. 45 minutes out of a 60-minute period? Or are you writing that entire 60-minute and then you take a break?
Yeah. And I mean, there are times like I didn't take a break this morning. I wrote from 9 to noon or 9:30 to noon.
And I want to emphasize, because there are some people who are going to watch this and they're going to kill themselves. This works for Katie. It works for her brain, her energy level. She can do this. If you cannot do this, there's nothing wrong with you. Like,
Katie is just better than you, and that's okay. Katie is just better than you.
I want to try it. So I'm trying to get like some data. So you're about 50 words per minute. I could beat that with dictation.
It's important that you understand that it wasn't like I sat down and started doing that every day.
Yeah.
What I actually did, I had a spreadsheet and then I just said, okay, I'm going to write. And I had a spreadsheet and a timer. And I said, I'm going to write for an hour and see how much I first draft. And so it was like, okay, I did 1,200 words. And then all of a sudden I was doing like 2,000 words. And then all of a sudden I was doing 3,000 words in an hour and I was able to do it more. So there certainly were days where I was like, my brain is really full because I just wrote a lot of words. But then I would just figure out how to recharge and like what made me feel better. And then I would come back at it the next day and it was a little easier. And so for 3.5 years, like I've been doing this, right? And so it really just becomes a skill and a love. Like I just love being in words. And that's the other thing. There's a passion for that, right? So yes, I'm glad you said that caveat. This works for me. There are other people that do it too. You don't have to do this. I worked into it. It's just a way to think about word count that I had to find. We don't have to be martyrs. Like this is just the work we do. Like it's just what I do. My husband goes to work. I go, you know what I mean?
And I think the habit is probably the most important thing. Like if you can't do a straight 60 minutes, well, can you do 15 minutes every hour, every 15 minutes for a 4-hour period every day, or whatever your habit is? Can you do it consistently? I mean,
yeah.
Well, and especially for those that have full-time jobs, that's the hard part is to, look at it in a different way. Is if you have a full-time job, 4 hours is a lot of your day. But when that is your job, then it's a little bit of a difference. But it's a good mindset change because a lot of us are like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine getting that many words in. But you're right. If this is your job, if this is, we all have done hard jobs. So this isn't any harder.
It also offers you a lot of freedom, though, because if you can crank out 3,000 words if you sit down and focus for an hour, then even if your day goes to absolute hell, you'd be like, okay, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., it's okay. Because I know I'm going to sit down for 60 minutes and get my words done so I can,
Other thing, too, is, Kelly, it made me laugh. You were talking about that writer that wrote this book at the tire shop or whatever. I'm like friends with my local tire shop because they do our oil changes. And they just know, like, if, like, they're like, we have like a 3-hour thing. I was like, no problem, I'll just work. So I just sit there and work. And now they like have my books because they are always asking about it. And I just know that, like, I just take my computer, I get to do things that my family needs done, but I get my work done while I'm there and I can just like kick the words out. However, I will say, I remember working a full-time job and I remember trying to work a full-time job. And, I remember that pressure. And there is a little bit of pressure where I say I have the privilege of doing this, right? Like I've made this choice, we've structured it way. So this is my job. And there's so many days where I'm like, I'm going to do a 3-hour hike. And I'm like, no, like this is my job. Like, it's cool. I get to like go do it on my porch so I can be outside. At the same time, it's like, I'm not in the mood to edit, but this has to get done. And so you just like find a way to get into it and eventually get into it. And it's fine. But there's a level of discipline that you really have to lean into to crank out an ebook, paperback, and audiobook the first Friday of every month with high quality. Right. And that's just what I would to lean into.
Right. Now, how much of that process is helped by your outline?
Totally.
Because
She sounds like a planter to me. She sounds like a planter. I'm sorry, Jack.
Sure.
100%.
Because
Yeah, I'm a planter.
well, yeah. But still, you said you have like an outline that is like 5,000 or 6,000 words long. Is that right, or did I mishear that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be anywhere from 5 to 10,000, depending on the length and the complexity of the plot. Like, if there's multiple POVs, it's going to be like a bigger one, so that I can make sure all the threads come together. But I absolutely couldn't write that fast if I didn't know what was coming, because it'd be an editing disaster, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm so unproductive if I don't know where the story's going, if I can't see foreshadowing, if I don't know what's happening. So creating those outlines, actually I dictate the outlines a lot when I'm driving. So if I'm like going to Idaho for spring break to see my family, I'm like, cool, I have these 3 outlines. I'm going to start just talking out my ideas, and then I run it through ChatGPT, just clean it up, and then I copy and paste and create the outline. And I'll have outlines done a year ahead. So just like you were saying, Jack, like, well, like today I finished this and I was like, sweet, like I still can't record today. And I really need to do this like short story, but I outlined it the other day when I was like on my hike, like, hey, these are the ideas. I have the short story. So boom, ready to go. So outlining is like kind of sometimes I have to make time for it. Sometimes it just happens by dictating when I'm hiking.
Yeah. No, well, I've been getting flack from people in the YouTube comments and from my 2 wonderful co-hosts, because they keep, I've been in our tips segment, I've been mentioning tips like you should outline like this, or you should write an outline. And I'll get somebody being like, I never use an outline. I don't need an outline. I just write. And I was like, that's fine. And that works and I think it comes down to knowing your writing process, and then also not listening to the naysayers who are going to tell you that, you're wrong for doing it your way. But I thought that was when you mentioned your word counts, and then you mentioned that you have this like really long outline. It's like, that's maybe for, I don't know, it might be the minority of authors who do something like that, but maybe some folks should try it if they struggle with, like, they're getting through their first draft and it feels like a slog, and then they get stuck somewhere and then they leave it, and then they have 40 unfinished projects.
The thing is, I used to freelance plot. I could plot like a bleep. It is so much ingrained in my head that I can do it as I go. But to your point, because I dictate, I do need to know the beats of the scene before I start dictating, or the dictation is gonna.
Yeah. Sitting there, it's almost worse than looking at a blank screen. Like when you're just trying to start, if you're just like dictating without a plan in your head, it makes it very, very difficult to do anything.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that, because most of us, when we think about a book story, we kind of have those overarching bigger plot lines, the beats that are like in the Save the Cat or the midpoints and all of those pieces. And so I like what Katie was saying. It was like dictating that part and then getting it out of your body, like getting it onto the page and then having it organized, through whatever ways that you end up organizing through ChatGPT or whatever, and then having that like, okay, what plot holes do I have? Can I see that I've already like establishing, I'm going to need to do something here or here or here. And, I think that part of it is really beneficial to people, even that if you are a, planter or a pantser, which I think I'm actually more in the middle, where I kind of need that overarching storylines, but I don't always know all the details in between.
Yeah. And then there's not all plotting is on paper or typing. Is like, I'll think about the story and have it like in a movie in my head for sometimes weeks ahead of time. That's a plot, y'all.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
for sure. Yeah.
Anyway, to get this segment back on track, Katie. Tell us some more about your books. What do you have coming up? What's your next big release? I know you've got this series that's going to be going into Amazon. That's kind of a new thing, a clean romantasy. Tell us a little bit about all the things you got going on. What readers can look for from you in the near future?
Oh, I'm so excited. So May 1st is when the romantasy series that's going to go into KU goes out. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to launch early to my website in April or launch late to KU in May. I'm still trying to figure out my strategy. But yeah, that'll be May 1st if you like clean romantasy. It's like 1700 Age of Sail kind of feel, like ACOTAR on the high seas. Not fae. It's not like fae, and it's close to a romance. But it's really high action, like forward moving new magic systems, that kind of stuff. So it's like a high action romantasy that you see in other places like When the Moon Hatched and some of those other like big titles. And then I always have stuff going in Alcara. So Bianca, she's the network series. She started Miss Mabel's School for Girls. Her 11th book is coming out in April, and that's super exciting. So that'll be coming out. And then I have a co-written novel coming out March 1st. It's a Nordic-inspired young adult fantasy that finishes out a trilogy. So that's another really fun one. And then in July, we have a Kickstarter. So lots of fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of stuff coming out. That's great.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.